Hello and welcome to the After Sass. This is my follow-up video to Critical Sass, which I do about once a month, and I talk about new makeup releases in that video. And in this video, I try to look in my makeup collection. I'm gonna tell you why I picked the thing out and what it relates to in Critical Sass that I talked about. I didn't talk about any primers in Critical Sass, but this kind of relates back to Critical Sass. It's the Victoria Beckham Cell Rejuvenating Priming Moisturizer in the shade Golden. In Critical Sass, I talked about the new like shiny body oil from Victoria Beckham, and I'm not a body oil wearer, but I do like a little shimmer in my primer, and this primer has a little bit of shimmer in it, and it's also from Victoria Beckham, and I already own it, so I'm already like kind of fulfilling a fantasy that I wanted from Victoria Beckham. I might be done with... Am I done? It like stopped pumping. Hold on. Let me apply what made it to my hands. Anyway, this has a little bit of shimmer particle in it. It's a little bit bronzing. It's not so bronzing that I feel like it really negates the color of the foundation I put over it. Like, it might warm it up a little bit. It might make it a little bit darker, but not so much that it makes my face look different from my neck. That is, unless the foundation already does that, which I don't think I have any foundations that do that at this time. Let's try pumping that again. Okay, some came out. I must be close, which is wonderful. Very excited about that because I did pump it out the other day and it got was a little weird. It was not looking correct, which is why I shook it today, separated a little. But I think I am close to the end of this, which is exciting because it was one of my goals to use this up this summer. So perfect. I'm also going to use the Sisley Blur Expert and just prime my nose with it. I look cute today. My skin has been looking really good. I started using a spot corrector serum on my face, which I don't really have a lot of that going on, but I think it is making my skin just look better in general because it's the only thing I really added to the mix. That or the new retinol I'm using, but I feel like that's not doing anything. I think it's like this green serum I started using. I really enjoy it. In Critical Sass, I talked about the new foundation from Rabanne that was an old foundation but is being marketed as a new foundation. It was discussed as a like luminous medium coverage foundation, and I talked in Critical Sass about how I kind of just avoided reviewing Rabanne because they didn't have a foundation product, and I like to review a full brand whenever they have a complexion product because otherwise I'll just like pick and choose the products that I'm interested in. But like if I'm going to like fork out the money for a whole brand review, I want there to be a foundation product. When I looked at my makeup collection today, the only two foundations that I think would be close is the Surratt Dewdrop foundation, which I've been using a lot on camera recently, so I was like, well, let's not use that. And then also the Prada foundation, which is more of a soft matte. And then I was like, I'm not actually that interested in the kind of coverage that the Rabanne foundation has. I don't really like a medium coverage, and like medium buildable coverage in a dewy formula is like, it's not my preferred. So I just pulled out the Lisa Eldridge skin tint. So it's not a similar product at all, but whenever I'm thinking about new makeup releases, and something I like to do with Critical Sass and also this series is to think about if that item of makeup would even make sense for me to own, because would it even be something that I would enjoy? Now, obviously, sometimes I do test makeup that I know might not be my preference just to see what it's about. And like if I did a Rabanne brand review, I would buy that knowing that. But if it was just one item, if I was like in the market for a new foundation based solely on what I know about the description of that foundation, it wouldn't be a foundation that I would be tempted to try as my new foundation because those aren't the words that I like to describe my foundations. I like light to medium coverage, and I do prefer something more light leaning because I just don't like a very heavy feel on my skin. I do have one full coverage foundation, which I do use occasionally, but that's more for like specific type of events that I go to. It's not like something I'm wearing on the everyday. And so this just makes much more sense, and I already own this. And so why would I buy something that I'm fairly certain wouldn't really fit in my desired kind of complexion product? So I'm just going to use this instead. I have the shade T3. This is by far like my favorite product that I've tried so far this year. It's just really great, and I enjoy it, and I like the coverage it has. And like I said, it's not really worth comparing to the Rabanne one I talked about in Critical Sass. The most beautiful thing about having just washed your brushes is getting to use them for the first time after you wash them, and like all of your makeup applies just so much better than it has been. And I don't feel like my makeup was really applying that poorly, but there is a difference when you use a clean brush. I mean, obviously the sanitation of it all, which is most people's thing. Like, people have skin that is pretty reactive to dirty brushes, but knock on wood, my skin at this time is not. Look at my skin. Look at my skin. Why do I want to cover up my skin? Look at my skin. My skin's gorgeous. So a little skin tint, a little kiss of something. Obviously, everyone's comfortability with different coverages, that's going to vary from person to person. Perhaps whatever Rabanne was selling makes a lot of sense for you if you were on the market for a new foundation. But I would suggest, if that's the thing you're into already, take a look at your makeup collection. Is there a foundation that you have just not been using that is basically the same way that that's described? You know, I don't know a lot about Lisa Eldridge. All I know is that this is it. I'm going to apply concealer and contour off camera. I didn't have anything that I talked about in Critical Sass that I can relate back to this. So next I would like to discuss blush, and we're going to use a liquid blush today. In Critical Sass, I talked about the new Hourglass liquid blushes that they released. And liquid blush is not something that I truly spend a lot of time like thinking or desiring or pining after. I've had a couple, and I have a couple in my collection. They're both from Surat, but I think I tried the M Cosmetics one. There might have been more liquid blushes that I've tried, but those are like the only ones of note. So I wanted to pull out my Surat liquid blush. And I think this is a good example of why buying the Hourglass blush wouldn't make a lot of sense. I already talked myself out of it in Critical Sass because the shades are not my favorite. Like, none of them really spoke to me or I found very enticing. But something that languishes in my collection a little bit are these liquid blushes from Surat. And I love them. I enjoy them every time I use them. So it's not that I don't like the product. It's I often don't remember or think to use them. So the Hourglass blush reminded me I have some beautiful liquid blushes already in my makeup collection. And so I'm going to just use that instead. So the shade I'll be using today, this is the shade Cantaloupe, and I'm just gonna apply it. I love this because these blushes are kind of like watercolors, paints, I would say, that have a sheen to them. And the reason I describe them like watercolor is like, you get such a faint flush. It's not intense. And I think the Hourglass ones probably, if I had to guess, would paint a similar picture. They would be really, really like a wash of color, because a lot of Hourglass's powder products and their powder blushes are really, really easy to use. But like, as you can see, it's just mostly kind of like a warm sheen that warmed up the face just like a little bit. You can kind of see it, but it's not a lot. And that's what I really like about these, because sometimes I'll do a makeup look where I'll have like a really intense eye and like maybe also an intense lip. And then I get to blush, or I start thinking about my blush, and it's like, what can I use? And these are really, really good to use in that scenario. Like, I also often will use like a beigey blush, but like if I want something really icy, I can use Barba Papa in the liquid formula because it's like pretty icy looking. And if I'm looking for like a warmer, something to warm up the cheek a little bit, Cantaloupe's a really, really great option. I'm not sure that the Hourglass blushes have like a sheen to them. And I don't always need a glowy blush. Like, it's not something built in. I will wear a matte blush, but I really like that glow. I just like, look at how much life that brought to my face just from applying blush. I don't even really need a highlighter, but we will apply a highlighter. In Critical Sass, I talked about how suqqu released 2 limited edition powder highlighters. And I also talked about in Critical Sass how I kind of I'm a little bit over powder highlighter. I only have one in my collection, but I didn't want to use that powder highlighter today because the powder highlight I kept is very cool toned, and the look I'm doing today, we're going to add some cool tones. It's actually going to be very fall. That's the vision I have for the end result. So I thought like an autumnal leaf color cheek would work. Instead of trying to match one of the shades from suqqu as well, I just was like, let me just use my favorite highlighter. I figured when it all breaks down to it, I'm not looking for a new highlight. So just to inspire myself, I'm just going to use my current favorite highlighter. This is from Surat. It's the Torch Lumiere, and it's in the shade Diamante. I'm just going to tap some of that on with a brush. If I wasn't trying to like take stuff from Critical Sass and I was doing this look, I probably just wouldn't have added highlight because of how sheeny. I love being reminded of what I love in my collection. I think the suqqu highlighters are really pretty, and I do think if I got one, I would really like it. But taking that opportunity to just love something I have instead is nice because it doesn't cost me anything. I already have the thing. Let's talk a little bit about powder. I talked about the Too Faced powder. This was like very briefly in passing, and I basically said I don't need that powder. It was described as a soft blurring powder. If you happen to be new here, I love soft blur, and I love intense blur. I love a product blur. I love a blur. They love blur. They being me loving blur. And normally in these videos, I try to not grab things from my testing drawer, but I allowed it because I think we all know that this is like something I'm going to keep. So this is the Hourglass Vanish powder, and I have the shade Translucent Light. And the thing I like about this quite a bit is the amount of blur that this provides. So I'm just going to use this instead. It doesn't come in a cute heart-shaped package, and a lot of you did let me know about some compacts that are heart-shaped that I could buy. I appreciate you for that. If I was gonna buy just a mirror compact, like to use as a mirror as opposed to like having a makeup product in it, I would probably try to find like a cute vintage one as opposed to like buying a different product, because I think people were sending me or telling me about either a Korean Beauty or a J Beauty lip balm that comes in a heart compact. And if you watched my lip declutter or watched my entire collection declutter that I did at the beginning of July, I think you'll know that I don't really need a lip balm right now. I have quite a few going. Blurred, mattified where I wanted it. I didn't go on my cheek at all. When I use cream cheek products, I try not to go over anything but the bronzer and contour, because that's what I want mattified. Normally, if the cheek is glowy, like if I have like a cream highlight or like a glowy blush on, I try to not powder over that. I don't know. That's what I do because I don't want to mattify that sheen. So I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to use a couple of other powders because I love a powder, and we will move on to bronzer after that. In Critical Sass, I talked about the ByTerry bronzers, the tea to tan bronzers, the tart to tan bronzers. And I was really impressed with the light shade because, as I kind of said in that video, bronzers, like brands like almost never get them right whenever we talk about the two ends. It's like they're never deep enough, and then the fairest shade, it always has like a really strong undertone that makes it like it's a real decision to choose your bronzer. So like I think a lot of people have this where it's like you have like an orange undertone bronzer, a red undertone bronzer, you have like a rosy undertone bronzer, but like to see kind of like a more neutral bronzer in a fair shade like that, it's pretty uncommon. In fact, like I'm not even sure how bronzy that would look, which I think is the point for some people. Like if they want to warm up the cheek, that would be something that they would want to do. And I talked about how I thought that bronzer would be really, really great for the winter time if I were to buy it. However, I already have a bronzer that's great for the winter time for me. I haven't been wearing it a lot this summer, but I have the Gucci bronzer and I have the shade Fair. Now, this definitely does lean more into like that pinky bronzer situation. It is fair enough that whenever it goes onto my skin, it looks really natural. And for me, as someone who has like a slightly pink undertone, the rosiness looks really natural on me. And like when my skin does warm up in the sun, just like a little bit, that's the effect that you're going to see on my skin as opposed to a red or an orange. My skin just doesn't do that when it warms up. So this tends to look very, very natural on me. And the other thing is like right now, when it comes to bronzer, I'm very like satisfied with my bronzer collection as well. That's a personal thing. It's another reason I don't need to buy this bronzer. Bronzer for me is a category of makeup that I have trouble finishing up. And that's obviously like, I could also say eyeshadow and blushes are the same thing. But to me, like I don't need, not that I need a ton of blushes. Obviously that's all personal opinion. How many blushes you want to have or need to have is all up to you. Bronzer, it's like I feel like I could get away with 3. And I have like the undertones I want and like the warmths that I want from those 3 bronzers. Otherwise, it will just be a lot. And like the other thing is like bronzer compacts come with a lot of product in them typically because it does cover like more of your face than a highlighter. Normally, the amount of product you get in a bronzer is pretty generous. Like there's 12 grams of product in this, and in my, my regular powder. And I've been working on this powder and I put this on most of my face. I've been working on this for like 3 years and it has 8 grams of product and like I still have a ways to go on it. So it like a bronzer is just a product that I also don't go super heavy handed with bronzer either. So it's just like not something that I'm consistently finishing up. Adding another bronzer to the mix just because it's like new and I think it might work for me, it's just not really worth it. And also I just feel I'm not gonna do a bronzer roundup, so a bronzer would have to like really, really catch my eye to make me want to like review it or like buy it to like discuss on my channel. Or kind of like with the Rabanne foundation, I would have to want to do a ByTerry brand review. And this is the first product that ByTerry has literally ever released that I found worth mentioning, even just like it's just such a nothing brand to me. Cool, let's talk about eyeshadow. So the first eyeshadow, because we're gonna talk about two of the products I talked about in Critical Sass. I talked about this Chanel quad in Critical Sass, and I think it's such an interesting color range for Chanel to release. If I were gonna like buy a quad from Chanel, which I'm not really interested in buying, I think Chanel does some things great. I have some products from Chanel that I like. They lack in a lot of ways, Chanel, as far as like a luxury experience, as far as like touching the product and feeling the product, in my opinion. I don't like their compacts. They feel really cheap and like, you know, not of note, I guess is like a really good way to put it. Some people like that and they want to just carry the name brand Chanel to feel superior or for some reason. But whenever I'm buying luxury, packaging is really part of it for me. So anyway, like also like I've tried some luxury quads. I've tried Tom Ford and I have also tried Chantecaille. As far as quads go, I think those might be the only two brands that I've tried like luxury quads from. Oh, I mean, if you consider Charlotte Tilbury, but I don't consider Charlotte Tilbury to be luxury pricing. Like Tom Ford quads are like 90 or I think $100 at this point. Anyway, all that being said, if I'm going to go for this like kind of weird pastel grunge color story, I'm not going to buy it from Chanel. I think it's cool that a luxury brand is like making that color story. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, I think like indie brands are really where it's at. What I did is I didn't create a palette. I just took out a couple of my palettes that I have singles in, and I'm just gonna put a look together using the kinds of colors in the Chanel quad. This is gonna be like more of like inspired by. I'm not trying to match the tones specifically, but I want to use like a grungy yellow, a grungy purple, maybe get a teal in there somewhere, because those are the kinds of colors in that quad. I also want to say this, it does seem like a pretty, unless you're just putting like one of those colors all over your lid, which is what I imagine a person who regularly buys Chanel buys that quad and is like, oh, this is really different. They're probably not gonna like put more than one of those colors on their eyelids at one time, would be my guess. And if they're the kind of person who uses those sponge tip applicators in the quads, then they're probably just going to like, you know, take that sponge and just wash it all over their eyes. And I'm going to try to at least get 3 mattes on my eye today. I'm going to apply a shimmer too, but we're going to stay with mattes because I'm fairly certain that Chanel quad, texturally, I can only surmise that they are all mattes. I think I'm going to forego the pukey green. I like that kind of color, but the two palettes I pulled out, I don't really have one, surprisingly. I have more single shadows than what I showed you, but these are the ones that I like. I saw most of the colors that I needed for the look. So these are like my eyeshadow setting shadows, and this one in the center, I think I'm gonna hit pan any day now. I'm very excited about it. I mean, I understand that like I use a lot of it to set my eyelids, but it's nice that it's, you know, gonna get used, because I mean, I think the unfortunate fate of probably of a lot of the eyeshadows in my collection is that they're not going to be used all the way up. So I think on the outer portion of my eye, I really want to try to avoid the yellow meeting the purple. So I think the purple I'm going to like put out here. I have a purple here. I don't know what it's from. That's one thing about some of my singles collection. It's like a mishmash of like depotted things as well as singles. I'm gonna use this one. I think it is from one of Pat McGrath's 6-pan palettes whenever she did the motherships with no mothership no vowel. I think it's from I think it's from one of those. So I'm going to just kind of like pack it out here, do like just a little smoking, tapping it. Okay, I didn't want to use that brush. That also just might be enough. That little stamp. Maybe I lied. Maybe I do I like it to stamp on to kind of like wing out a little bit of the shadow, and then I'm just taking a smaller brush. And whenever I think about like Chanel releasing this, I'm wondering what they're viewing their general demographic doing with something like that, because the Chanel makeup line I think is like smart enough to know what their customer is going to like want and actually be willing to use whenever they release like special colorways. But that one just seems like particularly difficult, but I also love to see it because I think something that happened, I don't pay a ton of attention to like Tom Ford makeup all that much because like the quads, I liked the quality of them, and the only really thing that I haven't tried that I really want to try from Tom Ford eyeshadows are like the cream quads. I've not tried one of those. But like whenever I had the African Violet quad, and that quad was like so beautiful, and it was like an interesting color story, and I have to imagine that it got discontinued because it wasn't very popular, because it was like a little bit more difficult to put those colors together in a way that makes sense. So that's where I'm going to stop, like just like a little bit of a smoke situation there. And then the blue I'm going to use almost like a periwinkle blue. I don't know that any of the colors I'm going to put on my eye today are going to touch. Maybe I'll blend it up from the wing, but I also am not going to take this all the way over. Just want a little bit of it. Anyway, around the time I bought that African Violet quad from Tom Ford, they kind of like overhauled a lot of the quads. And like I said, I'm not like super well versed in it, but it seems like a lot got discontinued around that time. I love watching people who have like really large collections do their declutter, and I like getting to like see everything in it. And this is like not so much in a judgmental way, but it's more so, I mean, sometimes it is in a judgmental way, but also I just like seeing what people have, especially when people aren't so quick to declutter stuff just because it's not sold anymore. But I do remember that year, whenever I bought that quad, Michelle Wong going through her Tom Ford quads, like had to like double check what was still available. And I feel like Tom Ford got rid of most of its more exciting quads in that period of time. Like, so I just feel like luxury brands are like not always so keen on like putting like something like what Chanel is doing with this one together. I like to think about makeup in that way too. What's the brand thinking? Because like I don't know that, like, and luxury brands tend to not be like trend chasers. So I'm just wondering what they know or like what they heard. This yellow I'm gonna put on my inner corner of my lid. It's not gonna be like a brightening shade because it's kind of like a yucky yellow. I think the one in the Chanel quad is probably a lot lighter than that. And what I'm really enjoying about this, I'm not someone, especially on camera, doing these kind of like, I don't think that this is like like a technically skill difficult look, but these kind of looks takes like some thought and like some just like some thought. I don't always like to do that on camera, these kinds of looks, because I don't know, like it's just sometimes hard to walk through it. But I feel like thinking about the Chanel quad and like what I would do with it, what it's really showing me, really, if I was, and like I'm not gonna lie and say that like it's a quad that I was like super excited about to begin with, but doing this activity and trying to like use similar colors to build one eye look with it, what it's really showing me is like this is not a quad that I would use, because like I think this is cool, but like I'm not gonna do this often, and it would be one of those palettes where I would have to really think about it to pull it out to use. And I said this in another recent video, is that's not where I'm at with makeup. I really like my makeup to work for me, not makeup that I have to work for. I do want to finish this off with a shimmer. In Critical Sass, I talked about the Disco Dust eyeshadows from, I think that's what they were called, from Too Faced, and I kind of compared them to the Moon Dust eyeshadows. Like I think they both have dust in the name. I think they're supposed to be like Too Faced solution or like alternative to that. I actually don't have a Moon Dust eyeshadow, which I would have used if I had one that would go with what we're doing. But I also thought of like another very shiny eyeshadow formula. I thought of this palette. Some of you might not know if you're new here. Last year, I kind of deconstructed a bunch of my Pat McGrath palettes, and I made a palette full of special shades. So this is a bunch of special shades from a bunch of palettes from Pat McGrath, and this is this is what I made. This is what I did. I'm gonna use this shade, which I think is from Mothership 6. I don't want it at its full opacity. So I'm getting some on a very fluffy brush. And I'm also going to spray it with some setting spray. I'm going to lean over because I do want to take pictures in this makeup and just tap it onto the lid just to give us a little bit of sheen. I want my eyelids to still be visible underneath that shadow. And this is more of like a topper shade from Pat McGrath, but if you really go ham on it, it will just kind of take over and just be like a solid color. And that's not what my goal is here. And then I'm taking a spoolie. I got some on the blue and I don't think I like it being on the blue. Just, I kind of want it to like be separate from the colors. Kind of just like each thing is placed but not supposed to be mixed is how I'm feeling about this look. Not that it couldn't be mixed. Here's the eye close up. And I'm actually going to use burgundy mascara because why not add more to the color? I'm going to apply that mascara. I'm also going to apply some eyeliner and then we'll talk about lipstick. I was like, I think that's it for the video. That's not true. I just threw a little bit of brown eyeliner only on the tight line. I wanted to keep the bottom bare. And then I have the like burgundy mascara. It's the 3D eye enhancer from CoverGirl. They sent this in PR and it's in the shade Berry Brown, in case you're curious. I'm unsure on the formula, but I've been enjoying playing with it. I haven't given up on this formula yet. In Critical Sass, I talked about how MAC brought back some of their favorite discontinued lipstick shades. When I was thinking about it, I was like, how could I apply this to my makeup collection? And since this look is kind of just like a little bit strange, I decided to bring back one of my favorite lipsticks that I like haven't worn a lot on camera recently, but it was something that I used to wear a ton. So kind of like in the fashion of like bringing back an old favorite, I pulled out Gucci's A Royal Scandal. And I thought I would just go with this look because the look is just kind of weird. And I am going to spray my face with some Fix Plus, just like finish things out. I have not been using Fix Plus as much as I used to, and I'm like scaring myself. I'm like, I've just been doing more matte looks, but I think it makes sense because it's like summertime and I know the matte is only going to last for so long. That wraps up the video. Thank you so much for watching. I always love doing the after sass. It's like one of my favorite videos that I do on a regular basis because, well, I love Critical Sass too, but there's something really nice to be like reconnected with some things in my collection that make me excited about it again. It's like, well, that's really cool, but also the thing I already have is really cool. I also just want to like take a moment and celebrate. I have pulled out my single shadows. I'm not gonna say like a ton, but like I've been pulling them out more in order to use them. So my huge declutter of them has just made them so much more manageable. I just like wanted to follow up on that real quick. Like very pleased. I still need to buy a couple more of these containers. And I also have some single shadow holders on the way as well. So I'm very excited about all of that. And then also I haven't pulled this out in a while and I'm really excited that I got to do that today. I'm very pleased with everything that happened. If you happen to be new to my channel and you're not yet subscribed, I would love to have you subscribe. This video is a really good example of what my goal is to do on this channel, is to help myself and help you be just more discerning about the makeup that we're buying. I also talk about fashion and I also talk about fragrance on this channel, and I approach it all under the same lens. I don't want us to feel like we need to buy anything, and if we are going to buy something, I want to make sure that's good. I do reviews as well on my channel, but I try to only really tell you about the good stuff and celebrate that. And I just encourage you to use your own stuff before buying anything. So if that sounds good to you, I would love to have you stick around. Make sure you like this video. I'm on Patreon and I have channel memberships. You can check those out linked down below. That's just a way to support my channel and allow to make this a little more feasible for me to do. And also that funds reviews and other things I do with the channel. There's no pressure ever to join my Patreon. If you don't want to, or you don't have the funds to, perfectly fine. Liking, commenting, and sharing my videos is the best way to support me. I also have a link in my description box down below to help a family in Gaza. That GoFundMe was resourced from Operation Olive Branch, which is working to help as many families as possible in Gaza. And if you have the funds to do anything, I would rather you support them than to support me on Patreon. If you can do that, I would love for you to do that instead. And that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to follow your haute and you'll find me. And I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth. Tits out.